Okay, so for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at getting around Las Vegas, specifically the Strip. And we're thinking about the first-time visitor who is maybe a little intimidated by the idea of driving there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to see if the monorail is actually a good idea, for our listener who's going for the first time and doesn't want to drive.
Makes sense. A lot of people, I think, just assume that's the way to go. But when you get there, you realize how crazy the traffic is.
Yeah, and parking and all that.
Exactly.
So kind of clarifies something that I think a lot of people get confused about, which is the trams versus the monorail.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Because on the Strip, there are trams,
Right.
and they're free.
Yeah, the trams are free, and they connect certain casinos like, Mandalay Bay to Excalibur and Park MGM to Bellagio, even Mirage and Treasure Island on the north end.
Right, and that's all on the west side of Strip.
Exactly, west side. And those are all free, but the monorail is totally different. It's on the east side, and it costs money.
Right, and it goes behind the casinos like MGM Grand and Bally's, Paris Flamingo Harrah's, LINQ, that whole area.
Yep, that's the monorail route. And that's important to know because it's not right out front where you might expect it.
Yeah, so thinking about the cost, single ride's around $5.
$5? Yeah, not cheap.
And a 7-day pass is like $56 or something like that.
Okay, that adds up quickly.
But here's something interesting. They mentioned a buy one, get one deal if you use the My Vegas Slots app.
Oh, really? I've heard of that game, but I didn't realize it had those kinds of perks.
Yeah, so if you're into those mobile games and you're planning a Vegas trip, you might want to check that out.
Definitely a good tip for saving some cash.
So the big question is the monorail actually useful? Especially for someone visiting for the first time.
Right, that's what we want to figure out.
Kind of brings up a major downside, which is that it's behind the casino, so you have to walk to the back of the property to get to the station.
And that can add a lot of time to your trip, especially if you're not familiar with the layout of the casinos.
Yeah, they use this example of if you're staying at the Cosmopolitan, which is on the west side.
Right, very popular hotel.
It might actually be faster to walk across the Strip to Harrah's than to walk all the way behind the Cosmo to Bally's and then take the monorail one stop back to Harrah's.
Oh, wow, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah, so it really depends on where you're going and where you're staying.
Exactly. You got to factor in that extra walking time to the station.
The monorail only has 4 stops on the main part of the Strip.
Yeah. MGM Grand Bally's, Paris Flamingo, and Harrah's LINQ.
Those stations were all pretty close together anyway.
Right, so if you're just going a short distance, it might not even be worth the hassle of taking the monorail.
Yeah, you might as well just walk.
Especially with that extra walk to the station.
Exactly.
The monorail is very reliable.
Oh, yeah, that's a big plus. So if you're on a tight schedule like you have dinner reservations or a show to catch,
That's a good point.
the monorail might be a safer bet.
It's not going to get stuck in traffic or held up by construction or anything like that.
Exactly. It's kind of its own little world up there.
And in Vegas, traffic can be unpredictable, so that's a real advantage.
Yeah, especially if you're not used to driving in that kind of environment.
Maybe the monorail is best for 1 or 2 specific trips a day.
Right. Not necessarily your all-day transportation solution.
Yeah, because all that walking back and forth to the stations can add up.
There are ticket booths at every station.
Oh, that's good to know.
So you could buy your tickets there or redeem any coupons you have, like from the My Vegas Slots app.
Right, and then you scan your ticket at the turnstiles and head upstairs to the platform.
Yep, pretty straightforward.
And they had one more important piece of advice about safety.
Oh, right.
They said that while the convention center station is close to Resorts World, which is great,
Yeah, that's convenient.
they warned about walking between the Sahara station and the Strat at night.
Oh, yeah, that area could be a little sketchy.
Yeah, they recommend taking a ride-sharing service or a taxi for that stretch.
Definitely good to keep in mind, especially if you're not familiar with the area.
Absolutely safety first.
So I think the takeaway here is that for a first-time visitor to Vegas who doesn't want to drive,
Right, our target audience.
the monorail has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
It's reliable and it's not affected by traffic,
True.
but it's also kind of limited in terms of where it goes. And you might end up doing a lot of walking anyway.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. You have to weigh the convenience versus the potential extra walking.
And I think it really depends on your individual itinerary and how much walking you're comfortable with.
Exactly. Some people don't mind walking at all. Others want to minimize it as much as possible.
So I guess the question for our listener is, what are your priorities?
Right. What's more important to you, having a guaranteed ride or potentially saving some steps?
And that's something you got to figure out before you even get to Vegas.
Absolutely. Plan ahead and figure out what works best for you.
Yeah, because you don't want to be stuck, trying to decide on the fly when you're already there.
No, that'll just add stress to your trip.
And Vegas is supposed to be fun.
Exactly. So do your research, pick the transportation that suits your needs.
And enjoy the experience.
That's what it's all about.
So for our listener who is planning that first trip to Vegas and is thinking about the monorail,
Right.
I think a good thing to consider is, beyond just the basic pros and cons that we talked about, what is the overall vibe you're going for on this trip? Are you someone who likes to be on the go, constantly hopping from one place to the next, or are you more laid back and you're okay with taking things a little slower?
That's a good question.
And I think the answer to that question might help you decide if the monorail is the right fit for you.
I like that it's not just about the logistics, it's about your travel style.
Exactly, because ultimately it's about having a great time in Vegas.
Absolutely.
And whatever transportation gets you there in the best mood is the right choice.
Couldn't agree more.
So yeah, think about that as you plan your trip.
Good advice for any traveler.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks for that deep dive. That was really helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of the monorail now.
Awesome. Good to hear.
And next time we should dive into some of the other transportation options in Vegas.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot to cover.
All right, sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.